The odds of you dying on the top 39 safest airlines is about 1 in 20 million. Bottom 39 airlines, and your chance is 1 in 2 million, 10 times the likelihood. Ever increasing demand for flights and the numbers of passengers flying, why do crashes happen in the first place? With pilot error, mechanical failure, severe weather and sabotage being the consistent highest cause of fatalities.
The Kegworth air crash was caused by confusion and a single mistake. It was a mistake that would lead to the deaths of more than 1/3 of the passengers on board.
6 miles away from the airport, the aircraft had crashed in the centre of Stockport. Some people died on impact, others in the fire which followed. Altogether, 72 people lost their lives. No one on the ground was hurt. Only 12 people on board survived. It flew on as far as Hope's Car, an open site behind a garage, and here, finally, it crashed. Within seconds, the airliner had become a heap of tangled wreckage.
Faulty sensors like pitot tubes, which are these tubes that you can see on the outside of the plane that measure airspeed, can be attributed to several crashes over the past decade. Pitot tubes work simply by measuring the pressure caused by the force of moving air attempting to enter the tube. The faster the plane travels, the higher the pressure, allowing the pitot tube to measure the airspeed very accurately. The aircraft registered a malfunction and turned off the autopilot, giving manual control over to a panicked crew who had no visual horizon in the pitch black of a storm and proceeded to enter the plane into a stall, resulting in a deadly crash into the Atlantic Ocean. Pitot tubes are equipped with drainage holes and heating elements to prevent this kind of problem, but this particular model became overwhelmed with ice before it could be cleared.
Lightning. Planes are a natural target for lightning bolts.
Landing a plane on the water is extremely dangerous. Ditching is a controlled emergency landing on water. It can be caused by almost anything, but usually it's because of engine failure or running out of fuel.
Tool to help air crash investigators solve their mysteries. It's a simple concept, a heavily protected box that can survive fire, water and impact.
The Kegworth air crash with the deaths of more than 1/3 of the passengers on board. In the plane's left-hand engine, a part of a fan blade had broken free. It was sucked back into the engine chamber, causing the vibrations and puncturing a fuel line. The resulting spray ignited. Smoke had started to come into the cabin. The first officer had assumed the smoke was coming into the cabin from the right engine, but he was wrong. In the older 737s, air is fed into the cabin from the right-hand engine. But on this new plane, air was also fed in from the left. Along with the air came smoke. The right-hand engine, still in perfect working order, was shut down. The captain's mistake was noticed by many of the 118 passengers. It was also spotted by 3 of the cabin crew. Yet no one informed the flight deck that they had turned off the wrong engine. The plane started to descend gently towards an emergency landing. Power to the left engine was now reduced. Less fuel was pumped into it, dampening down the fire. The engine now seemed to be working normally. Pilot increased engine power to level off the plane ready for landing. This pumped fuel back into the left engine and it caught fire again. At 900 feet, the left engine cut out completely. Realizing he now had no working engines, Captain Hunt instructed his first officer to restart the right. In the air, the only way to do this was to jump-start it. But the plane was now flying too slowly to get the engine going again. Without power from either engine, the plane was travelling at 150 miles an hour and its angle of descent was too steep. Directly in the flight path was the village of Kegworth. Ahead, he could now see the approach lights of the runway. But between the plane and this safe landing was the M1 motorway. 29 seconds before impact, the ground proximity warning sounds in the cockpit.
Terrain. Pull up.
The plane was now just 100 feet from the ground and dropping at a rate of 8.5 feet a second. The plane had been heading towards the ground at 132 miles an hour. The first impact was in a field just feet from the M1. The force of the second impact split the plane into 3 and pushed it up the steep northbound embankment. Miraculously, the plane had managed to miss all the vehicles on the motorway. 39 passengers were dead. 8 more would die later from their injuries. but 88 people had survived. Call for external cameras to be fitted to all commercial aircraft so the flight crew can see the engines for themselves has not been implemented.
Manchester Airport, the 4th of June, 1967. British Midland Airways Flight 542 from Palma, Majorca. At this moment, the aircraft, an Argonaut, is on its final approach into Manchester.
Hotel Golf is overshooting. We've got a little bit of trouble with RPM.
Hotel Golf radar, why are you overshooting?
We've got a little bit of trouble with RPM.
Golf Alpha Lima Hotel Golf had turned away and for some reason was going round in a right-hand circle over Stockport before coming into land. And only the crew knew why.
Hotel Golf, we're unable to maintain height at the moment. Hotel Golf, will you get the emergency out?
Mechanical failure or human error? And what was the failure, if any? One of Hotel Golf's 4 propellers was feathered. This suggested an engine failure, but the airliner should have had no difficulty in reaching the airport safely on its other 3 engines.
Dropping like a stone. There was never any panic on board or anything.
The report says it cannot decide whether the failure of number 3 engine was due to fuel starvation or to misidentification. The report says failure of communication was a major contributory cause of the Stockport crash. BOAC discovered this crossfeed danger 15 years ago in 1953 and told the makers, Canadair, about it. Canadair apparently told no airlines and didn't change their flight manuals. Aer Lingus and the independent airline Invicta also knew about the danger. Others didn't. In 1953, there was no machinery for sharing information of this kind among the airlines.
Up until recently, planes were made from aluminum, which is a good conductor of electricity. If lightning strikes this metal, electricity flows along the route of least resistance, the metal skin, and exits harmlessly before continuing its natural journey to Earth. Modern planes make extensive use of composite materials that don't conduct electricity well, and that makes things more complicated. Manufacturers have to interweave a thin metallic mesh, only a few thousandths of an inch thick, into the skin of the plane. This system acts as a conductive shield, in much the same way as aluminum, allowing electrical energy to flow through it, making composite planes just as safe as those made from aluminum.
Landing a plane on the water, pilots don't undergo extensive training on ditching. That it's rare to have to ditch an airplane. The aircraft needs to float long enough for passengers to evacuate. But pilots have to worry about more than just the plane. Unlike landing on a runway, there are a lot of variables that are out of the pilot's control. The most obvious is the waves. The larger the waves, the more dangerous the landing. Pilots try to land parallel to the waves instead of across them, so the waves don't push the plane around. Another huge factor is the weather. Clear conditions give a pilot better control over the aircraft and increased visibility. If a plane brakes upon impact, there is a huge risk of flooding. And if a plane flips over, flooding will occur much faster. If the landing is successful, the next step is getting everyone off the plane, which has to happen quickly. It requires planes to be able to be evacuated within 90 seconds. Commercial planes use rafts and flotation devices like life preservers. They also come with flares and emergency radios. Airplanes are designed so that a water landing won't cause immediate harm to passengers. Many ditching-related deaths are from drowning, not the impact. This is the bathroom door on an airplane, and it can save your life. It actually has a hidden safety feature. In case of an emergency that requires the pilot to land on the water, you'll be grateful for these little yellow hooks. The number and placement of hooks on each wing vary from plane to plane, but they all do the same thing: help passengers to safety. They're an anchor for ropes, which passengers use to steady and pull themselves across the wing. The ropes and hooks can also be used to tether rafts to the plane, so they don't float away as passengers board. Plane does depressurize. Pull down on the mask. It's not to reach your face, it's actually to start a chemical reaction. There are no oxygen tanks on airplanes. Instead, the panel above your head contains a chemical oxygen generator. It's a small canister that holds sodium chlorate, barium peroxide, and a pinch of potassium perchlorate. And when all three mix together, the extremely hot chemical reaction lets off oxygen. Your seat cushion functions as a flotation device, but did you know it's also fireproof? Above some of those flame-resistant seats, you might see a little black or red triangle. Those triangles actually signify what's nicknamed William Shatner's seat. It's a reference to a 1963 episode of The Twilight Zone, in which Shatner's character sees a gremlin on the wing of the plane. The triangles signal to the crew which windows have the best view of the wings in case a flap malfunctions, or to check to see if they've been de-iced. Notice a small hole in the window. Usually not a good feature for a window, but necessary in this case. It's called a bleed hole, and it prevents your airplane window from blowing out. That's because the air pressure inside the plane is so much greater than outside, which would cause any normal window to explode. But the windows on an airplane are made up of 3 panes: inner, middle, and outer. The outer pane takes the pressure, the middle acts as a failsafe, and the inner is just there so passengers don't mess with the other 2. The hole also lets moisture escape from the gaps so the windows don't fog up or freeze. Before taking off and landing at night, crews will often dim the cabin lights and ask passengers to open their shades. This is to give their eyes time to adjust to the darkness. In case of evacuation, passengers' eyes will already be acclimated to the blackness outside. If the lights stayed on, their eyes would need time to adjust, and they'd end up wasting precious seconds stumbling.
P-H-A-K-Y-O-U. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.